Welcome to 101. I'm Greg Bassett, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. It's a big day here at PAC 14. We've got one of the big guys in the house, Bill Chambers from the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Greg.
Now, this is the time of year when we rely on you to keep an eye on all the things that are going on in the General Assembly and be an advocate for business. So what's going on up there?
This is, in my lifetime, probably the most pivotal General Assembly session in my 6 decades. And following politics for 40 years, there hasn't been a session like this at all. The movement with Kerwin, the excellence in innovation and education, which will, if funded, reform our education system beyond what Thornton was supposed to do a decade and a half ago, and finding the money for that. The Chamber and the business community statewide, our Chamber, the Maryland Chamber of Commerce, we've all come out and said we support the Kerwin recommendations, but we're not going to have you put it on the backs of business to fund it. And we were given a lot of assurances before the session by the new leadership, met with both Adrian Jones and Bill Ferguson, and they said, no, they understand this can't be put on the backs of the business community. And voila, last week, a bill gets dropped that would do exactly that, put this on the backs of the business community by dropping the sales tax 1 point from 6 to 5% and then taxing every conceivable service that citizens and businesses use statewide. Professional services, from taxing your hairdressing or your barber bill, your real estate taxes, your beauty shop, nail salon, lawyers, accountants, the internet. It's a biggie. It's a $2.6 billion grab at new money. The General Assembly leadership says this will only cost the average Marylander about $3 additional a week. I don't know where they got those numbers from. This is going to really hurt business. And in areas like ours in Western Maryland, where we're bordering other jurisdictions that are much more tax favorable, this is just another nail in the coffin. I spoke with an accounting firm yesterday who have offices in Delaware and said they've already met their principals about maybe moving their offices from the lower shore permanently into Delaware. And the scary thing about that bill, Greg, is it's likely to pass. It doesn't raise your personal income tax. It doesn't raise your property taxes, which the leadership committed to. But this is a tax proposal that is probably will come down in history as one of the highest ever passed in the state of Maryland. And I think it will pass. I think the governor will veto it, and it will be overridden overwhelmingly. So that's the latest news. There have been some other bills in Annapolis that are good news. The legislation introduced by Senator Miller and co-sponsored by Senator Carrozza to exempt family farm stand workers. That was an initiative that the Chamber and the Greater Salisbury Committee approached the Senate President, then Senate President Mike Miller, last summer about sponsoring. He didn't hesitate. It should have been included in the original exemption for agriculture, but it wasn't. So we just testified on that bill a couple of weeks ago, and it looks like that will go through. So all of our family farm stands here in Wycomico County in the Lower Shore and 1,400 statewide that employ high school kids and college kids. Usually it's their first time job.
Yeah, we've all done a turn at the farm stand, yeah.
So they'll be exempt from this $15 an hour minimum wage.
Right.
And the big thing about that is it'll keep these family farm stands open. They'll be able to compete with commercial grocers. And in many cases, these retail family farm stands are the difference between a family farm staying solvent from year to year.
Right.
Because farming is it's a tough business. It's weather dependent. It's commodity pricing dependent. It's tough to make a living, and we've seen what's happened to the dairy industry nationwide right now. So that's been a good bit of good news. Another bill that Senator Carrozza introduced would be the verification bill. This is when a seasonal employee reaches that 106-day threshold. And this all goes back to the Safe and Sick Leave Act of 2 years ago, which requires an employer to give an employee who works a minimum of 106 days, 5 days of safe and sick leave. Right now, the hospitality business all over the state is saying that's being abused, that an employee works that 106 and then they take 5 days off and
right.
get paid. This bill would now require that employee to provide verification that they use the leave under the guidance and the provisions of the law. So when you or I hire that employee, as a condition of employment, he or she understands that if they're going to take leave after their 106 eligible days, the following things must be filled out on a document to verify that they actually had a doctor's appointment, they actually had a parent that needed transportation to a doctor's appointment, the areas that come under that law. That did not get that got a lot of pushback. I testified on that with a panel of other chamber folks, and the other side really pushed hard back at that. And it's tough eating away at these previously passed legislative initiatives like safe and sick leave. It's tough eating away at the minimum wage bill, and it won't be eaten away. So these, I know Senator Carrozza wanted to extend that 106 to 120. That's dead on arrival. So these employer mandates, which is what this chamber and most chambers of commerce that advocate fight for, there's no end in sight. And this new family medical leave bill, which likely won't pass this year but will come back with a vengeance next year, would add 0.5% payroll tax to every employee and employer in the state to create a fund that offers up to 12 weeks of leave under certain provisions. If you're ill, your wife's ill, it extends way down to your pet right now. I hope that's going to have to be vetted out in committee. But that's a huge employer mandate that, with Kerwin right now being the focus in Annapolis, that one will be back next year, and it's going to be hard to fight it. We're going to have to, as a business community, look for ways to modify these horrible bills. I think we've learned our lesson, the state chamber and a lot of chambers in Maryland. You can't walk into the legislator's office and say no. You've got to walk in and say, we need to sit down and see what we can do to help get this modified so that it at least lessens the impact of the business community. Because the way it was done in the past, to just walk into the General Assembly leadership and say no, wasn't working.
Right.
And you got nothing in exchange. You literally were shown the door, and that was it. So
it's great that you guys came out for Kerwin, because it seems like, typically small business people might be conservative leaning. The governor certainly has set a tone on Kerwin, like this is a great idea, but it's just going to cost way too much money. We probably can't do it. We need a Kerwin light. There was talk about that. Rick Kerwin, when he gives his speech, it's like, to him, it's all or nothing. You guys had him down to talk about that. I know you were influenced by that. You're very pro-education. So the idea is like this would be a good thing, but the payment thing is just awkward. But you could argue maybe that because businesses are the ones that are going to benefit by having better employees, that maybe you should pay?
Most businesses agree that we have to reform our public education system. We have to protect our community colleges. And education is morphing and changing nationwide, especially with the advent of online resources. So if we're going to protect our investment as businesses, and we really put our money where our mouth is about workforce development and the 21st century, the new age of what jobs look like for kids out of high school and college, then the business community does have to put up their fair share. We can't ask everyone else to pay for something that benefits the business community and our bottom lines directly. And I think most business owners get it. What really is concerning is this is on top of all of these other employer mandates that we just spoke about.
Right.
You hit me with mandatory leave. Most businesses statewide already offered their employees leave. It's kind of a common sense thing. I've invested in you. You need some days off to take care of your health or your wife or father or mother's health. Kind of a common sense thing. I'm going to give you leave because I don't want to lose you, because we're in a very competitive environment for employment.
Right.
But the state said, you're going to offer 5 days. And now the corrections are being made.
Yeah, when the restaurant owners complained to me about this, I'm like, we've been doing this in business for years. You guys have gotten a free ride. Yeah, this is my first initial attitude, but then when they explained to me the entire process, I understand it from their point of view.
So put minimum wage on top of that.
Yeah.
Put this new, Healthy Families Act that's probably going to get passed next year. And now you're saying, here's a $2.6 billion tax package. You're going to lower the sales tax, but then you're going to tax things that have never been taxed before. These services have always been a tax issue in Annapolis for decades, but they've been laughed out of the committee room. You're not going to tax a woman getting a manicure or a guy getting his hair cut. It was just unthinkable. A few states do this, but those states are also tax advantaged in terms of they don't have a sales tax. Their state income taxes are much lower. So, they get you one way or the other. But in Maryland, it seems like we're piling on to the business community, and they're looking for a breather. And now there's concern about the economy in general. And we seem to get hit hard on the Eastern Shore. The D.C. suburbs seem to stay insulated because of the federal presence. So a lot of these initiatives that come out of the D.C. suburbs, those legislators don't take into consideration the challenges that our rural areas here on the shore in Western Maryland face. Because our competition literally is a bike ride up the street, and it's called Delaware.
Right.
And for Western Maryland, it's 4 states. It's Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia. So those are the things I think Annapolis doesn't think about, which I know the business community is much more engaged and much more ramped up in what we're doing in Annapolis with legislators, not just our own delegation. I think they get it. That's not the problem. The problem is the legislators from other jurisdictions in the state that think they know what's best. And I think they're well-intentioned, but I also think they don't do their homework, by and large.
You're relatively new to the community. You're in Calvert County, Prince George's County. Did you have any idea what we were facing here on the shore in terms of our role in the state?
No, I didn't. A taste of it maybe in southern Maryland with agriculture, but in terms of the lack of attention that the lower shore has received from not only our federal partners but state leadership, it was surprising. I feel like the shore has kind of been left to fend for itself, at least my experience here the last 3 years. I think that's changing now. And I know everyone says be careful what you wish for, but beggars can't be choosers. And if we're going to ask the state to pay more attention to us, there are going to be some things that the state's going to ask us to do or want us to do that we're not comfortable with. But in the long run, if we benefit greater than what we have to give up, I think it's worthwhile.
Right. I don't want to criticize Carl Anderton, who replaced Norm Conway, but when Norm Conway first was voted out, someone said stand anywhere in Salisbury and do a 360 look around, and you're going to see something that Norm Conway got for us with the help of the state government. And it seems like we've missed that. I keep wondering if that's been replaced or where we fit in with all that. But is the dynamics of the person who's up there representing us, does that really affect how things turn out?
Yeah, sure does. It sure does. I think we're rebuilding those relationships and those influences. I think having Cherie, or Delegate Sample Hughes, as the Speaker Pro Tem is a signal from General Assembly leadership that the lower shore has to have a voice, in a leadership voice. I think Senator Mathias was one of those senators that the Senate President, Mike Miller,
Listen to.
He listened to him. He brought him into the fold, and Senator Miller has told me many times he had a voice to represent and protect the Eastern Shore. So Mary Beth, Senator Carrozza, is going to have to build those relationships on her own. And that's what you have to do when you're a freshman senator or you're a freshman delegate. You come in maybe with a lot of experience being on one side of the aisle or not, but you need to rebuild or build relationships. I think the fact the county has hired a part-time lobbyist is a good thing. I know there's some criticism about that, but you need as many voices up there as you can get.
They just went about it wrong, but yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
You need someone that has access to certain offices that we haven't had access to before. And I think that the county's lobbyist has that ability. Yes, I agree our delegates and senators are also our lobbyists as well. But the more voices you can get up there, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, Greater Salisbury, the lobbyists for the county, our delegation, the more those legislators hear the same story from the same region in Maryland, it does have traction. Absolutely has traction. I saw this in Calvert County. People bemoan the fact that Mike Miller has left his indelible fingerprints all over his district. Well, again, be careful what you wish for, because when Senator Miller leaves the Senate, it's highly unlikely you'll ever have a Senate president from Southern Maryland in multiple lifetimes.
Yeah.
And the things that he did for his district will not be duplicated or recreated by his predecessor, no matter how good he or she is.
One thing I admire about you is that I'm sure you have a political leaning, but I'm not really sure what it is, because it seems like you're more about getting things done than following a party doctrine or a platform. What's that like to really be focused on moving that ball?
I think it's the only way that you can, at least in my position with the chamber, it's the only way we can serve our members. And I have so many different political leanings personally.
Yeah, I have no idea where you
My
are.
parents were devout Democrats. They would vote party and ticket line no matter what kook was running as a Democrat. And then I had plenty of dear friends that are Republicans. And intelligent, educated people my age and younger that do the same. And I don't understand it. I think politics is the worst profession to be in today. With social media and the ethics reform in Maryland, finding good men and women that care and want to do the right thing, it's hard because those people, in many cases, don't want to be subjected to the scrutiny, the oversight, the tearing apart your personal life, your family. They don't want to be subjected to that. So it's tough to get good people involved in leadership roles, elected or appointed. And I think part of the role of the Chamber of Commerce is to help seek out those folks, business leaders, community leaders, educators, and say, we'll back you up, we'll support you. But we need your voice. We need you to lend your expertise and experience and knowledge and wisdom and passion to serve your fellow citizens. I served one term as an elected member of the Board of Education in Calvert County, and that was my commitment. My kids were both in school at the time, and I felt as though I could contribute something because I would hear it from both sides. I'd hear it from the child going to school as well as getting involved and hearing it from the educators, and learned a lot in those 4 years. But I think the role of the Chamber is to foster as much economic growth as we can, and supporting public education is critical. The first time I broached this as a Chamber of Commerce issue was in Calvert County, and I had lots of business people say, what does education
Right.
have to do with the Chamber of Commerce? And after explaining to them how a top performing public education system at that time, back in the early 2000s, it was Montgomery County. Every business entity, statewide and out of state, wanted to find a place to locate a business in Montgomery County because of their outstanding public school system. In Virginia, with Fairfax and Loudoun, those school systems, top-notch systems in the state of Virginia, look at where the business is. Look where the tech jobs are.
Yeah.
Look at where the manufacturing is. It's where you have a jurisdiction that has outstanding public education. And the same thing will happen in the Lower Shore in Wycomico County. We've started to make the commitment. We got a great superintendent. I think we have a Board of Education that understands. I think our political leadership is coming around, and it's a slow process. But I've always said this. You put our system in the top 10 in Maryland, and you're going to have business interests that you never imagined would want to come to Wycomico County, because now we have checked off the box. We have a high-performing public education system. We have low cost of living. We have an environment that welcomes business, and we have such lifestyle and life amenity features here with our rivers close to the ocean. I mean, having that kind of quality of life and combined with the other ones. This is what businesses look for. But they don't look for a jurisdiction that has infighting at the top of its
Right.
elected officials. They don't look at a location that has way behind on infrastructure, which we are. And they don't look at a location, and this is not in order, that has low achieving public schools. I attended a lunch a couple of weeks ago in Delaware. It was Governor Carney, House Speaker Schwarzkopf, the House Minority Leader, Democrat, and the President of the Sussex County Commissioners. And they spent an hour talking about three things. Not talking about patches on employee shirts, and not talking about different disagreements on charter. They talked about infrastructure, water, sewer. They talked about transportation, and they talked about broadband, and they talked about public education. And all of those things combined create an environment people want to be a part of. And that's what Delaware is doing. And listening to Governor Carney, a Democrat, talking, he sounded like the most pro-business Republican governor, equal to any that you'd find in Texas, any other Republican-leaning state. He was all about the business community because he knew the growth of Delaware, that small state, and its future prosperity depended on water, sewer, broadband, great schools, and can I get from point A to point B in a reasonable amount of time? And that's all they talked about for an hour. That's a discussion we ought to be beating on down here constantly. And we get distracted so many times by these other things that take away from the assets that we do have. And it's disappointing.
You've made the Chamber such an advocate for education, and as someone who used to write a daily editorial in the daily newspaper, I had to have an opinion, and I used to wonder, like, I would look for other voices, people to help me understand what position we should take. And I would reach out to the Chamber on some issues, and they would always say, well, our membership's divided, we're not going to take a stand on that. And it was so frustrating to me because I really wanted to know what the sense of the community was to sort of help me make an opinion.
Right.
They were so afraid of dividing the membership, but I don't get the sense that you care about that as much, that you've got kind of a list of things that matter and you're pulling everyone in that direction.
I think we are, but I also have to credit our board of directors and our council. They have been lockstep, supportive of these initiatives and the things that we feel are important. And there are members that disagree with us. And I say, well, we're a democratic institution. I want you to join a committee and have your voice heard. Join a committee and then eventually move on to the council or the board. Because I take direction from those men and women. And when they tell me, Bill, public education is something we really need to hang our hat on, then we're going to move forward. Certainly there's things I suggest and bring to their attention that we should focus on. But ultimately, they represent the 700 plus businesses who employ 50,000 plus employees across the lower shore. So they are those folks' voice. And if we have disagreement with members, I always ask them, then get engaged. We need to hear another viewpoint, another side of the story. Tell us why you disagree with the position. There were members that didn't think our position on supporting public education was something we ought to be doing. Members had the attitude, some members did, that you're throwing good money after bad. But when they understood what maintenance of effort was, when they understood what we were one of 2 counties in the state that were funding at maintenance of effort, when they understood that we have to change their dynamic from spending or funding money on schools to investing in schools, understand that you spend and fund prisons, but you invest in education. Some of those members said, okay, I'm starting to get it, but I want there to be accountability, just like I have accountability and return on investment in my business. And that's recognized, and that's important, and that's a part of our narrative.
Right. And you've kept the Chamber, a respectable group in that the people, the politicians and stuff, will reach back to you and ask for your guidance on things.
They do, but it's a partnership. I don't know it all. I only know what I don't know. And I think any elected official, it's in his or her best interest to reach out to an organization that has its tentacles in a lot of different places to say, hey, what are the tea leaves on this particular issue? And I do. I've gotten calls from the floor of the House and the floor of the Senate since I've been here 3 years during a floor vote saying, hey, I don't know much about this bill. Are you familiar with it? And that's refreshing.
Right.
And I hope that happens in other jurisdictions. I was in Annapolis 2 weeks ago testifying on the Association Health Plan bill. And this would allow our chamber and every chamber in the state to offer health insurance to members. And we have hundreds of members that don't offer any health insurance because once the individual mandate was thrown out,
right,
companies with 3-4 employees can't afford to offer their employees health insurance. They want to,
right,
they can't afford it. So I'm out there testifying on this bill, and the lobbyist briefed me prior to that and said, be aware that the senator who sponsored this bill this morning did not know he sponsored it and hasn't read it. And that is atypical in Annapolis. It's not unusual. It is kind of, not for all the legislators, but for quite a few, they don't know what they've sponsored or co-sponsored.
They've been asked to put something up, and they do.
And this gentleman got up and introduced the bill, and he didn't really know what to say. And he said, well, I'm going to defer to the experts to my right.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, I'm not an expert. I'm here to represent the Chamber of Commerce, the business community. I don't know the nuances of the health insurance industry. And, of course, the other side was there, Care First, and, of course, they opposed it again. So that I don't know if that's going to go anywhere. 14 other states allow their chambers and labor unions to offer health insurance. It's a good thing. It's going to put more people on the rolls, more employees on the rolls of getting health insurance to protect their families. So it's a really good thing. But I think the insurance lobby is way too big right now, so we'll have to maybe buy our time on that one.
Your after business hours events are going really well. The ribbon cutting events, getting a lot of promotion out there for businesses. So, it seems like a lot of vitality. going on in the chamber, and you're about to make a big move. Tell me about that.
We are moving a block, and we're moving
Up the hill.
in elevation. When I started 3 years ago, I asked the question, why are we competing with our members by renting meeting space?
Right.
And why are we competing with our members by leasing office space? And I didn't really get a good answer from previous leadership. Albeit to say, they bought a 10,000 square foot building a couple of decades ago. The ideas and concepts behind that didn't work the way I think some past leadership in the chamber wanted it to. And it was a huge asset for the chamber because it was paid off. But it was
when
also,
they paid that off, that was a big deal.
it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And we respected every one of those businesses and individuals that contributed. And that will all carry to the new space. It will not ever be forgotten. But we're sitting on an asset. The asset is 82 years old. It is in need of massive repairs and renovations. We're competing with our own members and renting space and leasing space. And it took some convincing, but the board and previous leadership who contributed to that building agreed, let's take the asset, let's make it work for the chamber. The chamber's 100 years old this year. We have no rainy day fund. We do now, but we didn't. And that was appalling to me when I started, that we have no money in reserve. In the event of an economic turndown, a natural disaster, we can't afford to lose an institution like the Chamber of Commerce. So we're leasing space, very reasonable, up the street at 200 East Church Street.
Right on Route 50.
Right on Business 50.
The old Baptist church.
It's much smaller than where we are now. We spent not a penny to have it renovated. We're excited to be there. It offers everything we need to continue to serve our members. We have a nice investment fund right now that will carry the chamber forward long after I'm gone and the next chamber president's gone. It'll be there to guarantee this organization goes nowhere the next 100 years.
And your building's been sold and it'll be torn down?
It's been sold. It's going to be leveled. The elevation will be raised 2 feet, and then a new 6-story building will be erected, which will be in complement to the Ross next door.
And you'll still be downtown, just up the hill, and more visible on Route 50.
Downtown, I get a little more exercise walking down to Market Street now. So.
How's your experience been coming to Salisbury? Has this been what you thought it would be, or what's your paradigm shift on this?
I love Salisbury. I love Wycomico County. I love the Lower Shore. I loved where I was on the other side, and I miss people there. But this is a way of life that I'm telling you, people on the other side of the bay that I describe the way of life over here, they perk right up. And no, I'm not trying to overpopulate the Lower Shore with a bunch of Western Shore people, but the lifestyle, the quality of life, the people have been so genuine and so friendly, so different from Montgomery and Prince George's County, and I love those jurisdictions. I grew up in Montgomery, and I worked 32 years in Prince George's, but it's just a different place down here. People are so genuine and friendly, and I look forward to going to work every day, and there are some days I hate leaving the office. I just love what we do, and I love serving the business community.
He's Bill Chambers. He's CEO of the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce. He's our advocate for the business community and everywhere, and we're thrilled he was here today. Thanks for being here, Bill.
Thank you very much.
I'm Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent Newspaper. Another edition of 101 right here on PAC 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and one-on-one. We'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it, and let's make a difference.